She refused to help when I had sepsis, told everyone I was attention-seeking. But when my new life became public, everything she built crumbled overnight. At 34, I was dying in a hospital room while my wife scrolled through social media. 2 years later, she was begging for another chance. But the real story started with 3 words that changed everything. Handle it yourself. I remember the exact moment I realized my marriage was over. It wasn't during a heated argument or after discovering some devastating secret. It was at 3:17 a.m. in a sterile hospital room, watching my wife Catherine scroll through Instagram while my fever spiked to dangerous levels and my organs began shutting down. But let me take you back to where this nightmare actually began. 4 weeks ago, I started feeling off. Nothing dramatic at first, just bone-deep exhaustion and this persistent ache that seemed to settle into my joints like wet concrete. The kind of thing you dismiss as pushing too hard at the marketing firm where I work, or maybe sleeping wrong on our old mattress. Catherine, my wife of 7 years, rolled her eyes when I mentioned seeing a doctor. "You always get hypochondriac when you're stressed about the quarterly reports," she said, not even glancing up from her phone where she was liking vacation photos from friends we barely spoke to anymore. I tried to push through it. That's what responsible adults do, right? Power through. Don't be dramatic. Don't be needy. But then the fever started creeping in, not the gentle kind that whispers you should rest, but the vicious type that makes your bones feel like they're filled with molten lead. The kind that has you waking up at 2 a.m., sheets completely soaked, wondering if this hollow, burning sensation is what dying feels like. Catherine's compassionate response? Take some ibuprofen and stop waking me up. I have that presentation tomorrow. The way she said it, with that particular blend of annoyance and superiority that I'd grown to recognize over the years, should have been my first real warning. The night everything shattered completely, I woke up and couldn't move my right side properly. The room tilted like a carnival ride. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently I could taste copper, and when I tried to speak, my voice came out as barely a whisper. I called out to Catherine, my tongue thick and uncooperative, desperate for any sign of human concern. She groaned dramatically, rolled away from me with theatrical exhaustion, and delivered the words that would echo in my skull for months to come. "I'm not your babysitter. Handle it yourself." I lay there in the suffocating darkness for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, trying to make my rebellious hands cooperate enough to dial my phone. My fingers felt disconnected from my body, clumsy and foreign. I finally managed to call my sister Emma, who lived 43 minutes away, but somehow made it in 18, breaking every speed limit between her apartment and our house. The next part exists in fragments, like a fever dream painted in hospital fluorescence. I remember Emma's face when she saw me, the way her practiced calm as a pediatric nurse cracked for just a moment before she shifted into emergency mode. I remember her keeping her voice steady while telling Catherine we needed to get to the emergency room immediately. Catherine's response still burns. "You're enabling his attention-seeking behavior, but fine. Go ahead and waste your evening." The emergency room became a blur of urgent voices and efficient movement. Words like septic shock and multiple organ involvement floated around me like debris in a storm. My temperature had spiked to 104.7 degrees. My blood pressure was crashing toward dangerous lows. Something about a streptococcal infection that had gone systemic, turning my own immune system into a weapon against my body. I remember the attending physician's expression when I told him how long I'd been feeling unwell, the way his eyes widened slightly before he glanced at Catherine, who was sitting in the corner scrolling through Facebook, occasionally sighing with boredom. They admitted me immediately to the intensive care unit. Emma stayed until security forced visiting hours, promising to return first thing in the morning with clothes and anything else I might need. Catherine looked genuinely put out when the head nurse suggested she might want to stay overnight. "I have an early client meeting tomorrow," she said, already gathering her designer purse. "Robert's in excellent hands here. You people are the professionals." The next several days dissolved into a haze of 4 antibiotics, blood draws, and delirious half-sleep. My body was fighting a war against an infection that had nearly claimed victory before anyone realized there was a battle happening. Emma came every single day after her shift at the children's hospital, bringing my laptop, comfortable clothes, and actually asking my doctors detailed questions about my treatment plan and prognosis. Catherine visited exactly 3 times during my 10-day stay. The first visit lasted 12 minutes, and she spent most of it complaining about having to pay $20 for parking. The second time, she brought me lukewarm coffee from the hospital cafeteria and spent 45 minutes telling me about some social media drama involving her yoga instructor that I'd missed while being unconscious. But the moment that shattered whatever remained of my heart, it wasn't the parking complaints or the cold coffee or even her obvious boredom. It was when I asked her to help me reach the water cup on my bedside table. The infection had ravaged my system so thoroughly that lifting a plastic cup without trembling felt like attempting to bench press a truck. My hand shook uncontrollably, and the simple act of staying hydrated had become a humiliating challenge. Her response, delivered with the same annoyed eye roll I'd seen 1,000 times before: "I'm not your babysitter. Handle it yourself." I just nodded and stayed silent, something cold and final settling in my chest like winter fog. The nurse who entered 20 minutes later found me still trying to reach that water cup, my hands trembling with exhaustion and medication side effects. Without a word, she helped me drink, checked my temperature, adjusted my pillows, and made sure I was comfortable. All while Catherine sat 3 feet away, watching TikTok videos with the volume turned up, completely absorbed in strangers dancing to trending songs. That's when the truth crystallized with painful clarity. 6 years of marriage, and my wife possessed less natural compassion for me than a complete stranger who was simply doing her job. The realization didn't crash over me like a devastating wave. Instead, it seeped into my bones quietly, like the infection that had nearly killed me. During those 10 days of recovery, Emma brought me books, sat with me through the worst of the fever spikes, and helped me take my first shaky steps around the unit when I was finally strong enough. My colleagues from the marketing firm sent thoughtful cards and messages. Even Maria, the sweet cafeteria worker who delivered my meals, showed more genuine concern than my own wife, always making sure to bring extra pudding cups because she'd noticed they were the only things I could keep down during the worst days. Catherine made 2 additional visits. Once to inform me that she'd had to cancel our planned anniversary trip to Napa because, obviously, you won't be up for wine tasting anytime soon. The second time to complain extensively about how she'd been forced to handle everything at home by herself, paying bills, dealing with my insurance calls, managing the house as if these were extraordinary burdens rather than basic adult responsibilities. She never once asked my doctors about my condition, my prognosis, or what kind of care I might need after discharge. She never once held my hand during the moments when the pain medication wore off, and I wondered if I was going to survive this. She never once looked at me with anything resembling the love I thought we'd promised each other 7 years ago. The day I was finally released, Catherine didn't come to pick me up. She texted that she was absolutely swamped and asked if Emma could handle the transportation situation. Emma did, just like she'd handled everything else that actually mattered. As we drove home through familiar streets that somehow looked different now, my sister kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, clearly wanting to say something but holding back. I spent that entire 40-minute drive planning my exit strategy. They say near-death experiences change you, force you to reevaluate your priorities and relationships. Mine showed me the truth about my marriage in devastating high-definition clarity. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every "you're being dramatic" moment played back in my mind like a greatest hits compilation of red flags I'd somehow trained myself to ignore. I didn't confront Catherine that evening or the next day. I simply watched her continue her routine as if nothing had happened, as if her husband hadn't spent 10 days fighting for his life while she maintained her social media presence and complained about minor inconveniences. She laughed at her phone, made dinner plans with friends, and grumbled about her day. Business as usual in Catherine's world. Meanwhile, I started making my own plans, quiet ones, the kind that would change everything. But that's where the story takes an interesting turn. First, thank you to everyone who reached out after I shared the beginning of this story. The response has been overwhelming, and reading your messages helped me feel less insane about what I was planning to do. Yes, it took me exactly 3 weeks after getting discharged to actually leave. Some of you might think that's too long. Others said I should have left from the hospital parking lot. The truth is, I needed those 3 weeks to make sure I did this properly. The morning after I came home, Catherine actually made breakfast. Not for me. She prepared herself an elaborate smoothie bowl and spent 20 minutes photographing it for her wellness Instagram account. I sat at our kitchen counter, still weak and experiencing occasional dizzy spells, watching her adjust the lighting and arrange the berries for optimal visual impact. She glanced at me and said, "You should probably eat something substantial. There's oatmeal in the pantry." Then she went back to editing her caption about self-care and morning rituals. That's when I texted Emma, "I need your help getting out of here." The next 3 weeks became a masterclass in strategic planning. Emma connected me with her friend Marcus, who had an available one-bedroom apartment in a complex with an elevator, crucial since I was still rebuilding my strength and was willing to accept month-to-month leases. While Catherine was at her job at the boutique marketing agency, Emma helped me slowly relocate essential items. Nothing obvious, just enough that I wouldn't have to return for basic necessities. The hardest part wasn't the physical logistics of moving while recovering. It was maintaining normalcy at home while my marriage crumbled in slow motion around me. Catherine barely noticed anything different. She was too consumed with planning a girls' trip to Scottsdale for the following month. "You'll be fine managing on your own by then, right?" she asked, not looking up from her laptop where she was browsing resort spas. "I mean, you survived 10 days in the hospital without me there constantly." I just nodded and mentally added "cancel joint savings account" to my growing checklist. The moments that crystallized my decision weren't dramatic confrontations. They were small, telling details. Finding my hospital discharge papers, which I needed for insurance claims, crumpled in the bathroom trash can. Catherine sighing heavily when I asked if she could pick up my prescription medications on her way home from yoga class. "Can't you just have them delivered?" "I'm not your personal pharmacy." Most devastating was overhearing her phone conversation with her sister, describing how I was totally milking this whole infection thing when I had to rest after attempting to do a load of laundry. "He acts like he's the first person who's ever been sick," she laughed. "It's honestly exhausting dealing with all this neediness." Emma was my anchor through everything. She helped me set up utilities for the new place, coordinate the logistics of my escape, and even stocked my future refrigerator when I was too weak to shop for myself. When I tried to thank her properly, she just hugged me carefully and mindful of my still tender condition and said, "I should have seen this clearly sooner. I'm sorry it took you nearly dying for me to understand." The day I left, I waited until Catherine departed for work at her usual time. I'd already relocated most of my essential belongings over the previous weeks, so this was simply the final step. I left my house keys on the kitchen counter alongside a brief letter explaining that I was done. No accusations, no emotional manipulation, just straightforward facts about my decision to end our marriage. I also left photocopies of my medical records from the hospitalization, showing exactly how close I'd come to dying from septic shock. Maybe she'd read them and understand the gravity of what had happened. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I'd said what needed saying. By noon, I'd turned off location sharing on my phone, blocked Catherine on all social media platforms, and changed my number. Emma helped me arrange the last of my new apartment setup, and by evening I was sitting on my second-hand couch, eating Chinese takeout and feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The text messages started arriving through Emma's phone within hours. "Very funny. He'll be back within a week when he realizes he can't handle adult life alone. Tell him he's being completely ridiculous. He can't just abandon a marriage because I didn't hover over him sufficiently in the hospital. And finally, he's going to regret this dramatic tantrum. I've already explained to everyone how unstable he's been since his near-death experience." Emma showed me the messages, but didn't pressure me to respond. Instead, she helped me create a shopping list for things I still needed, and we spent the evening comparing shower curtains online like normal people doing normal, peaceful things. Catherine's email arrived just as we were debating between blue and gray. "You're embarrassing both of us. Everyone knows you're just acting out for attention, like you always do. Remember how you needed to go to the emergency room at 3 a.m. Come home, and we can pretend this episode never happened. I'll even let you choose what we watch on Netflix tonight." I didn't respond. Instead, I scheduled my first therapy appointment for the following day. My therapist, Dr. Williams, listened to my entire story without interruption and then said something that hit me like a revelation. "You understand the difference between being lonely and being alone, don't you? Lonely is what you felt in that hospital room with your wife present. Alone is what you are now, and you're already demonstrating much better self-care." It's been 3 weeks since I left. My new apartment is small but filled with calm energy. The elderly couple next door, Helen and Frank, brought me homemade chicken soup when they learned I was recovering from a serious illness. That simple act of kindness from complete strangers made me weep more than leaving my marriage had. Recovery continues more slowly than I'd prefer, but I'm gaining strength every day. I can complete basic household tasks without becoming winded now. My appetite has returned with enthusiasm. Yesterday, I even managed to cook an actual meal, just spaghetti with marinara sauce, but it felt like a significant victory. The most surprising discovery has been the relief. I'd expected to feel scared, heartbroken, or furious. Instead, I feel like I can finally breathe properly. No more walking on eggshells around someone's perpetual irritation. No more bracing myself for dismissive comments. No more feeling like my very existence was an inconvenience to the person who was supposed to love me most. Catherine's attempts to contact me have escalated in both frequency and desperation. She's called Emma multiple times, cycling between tears and threats. She's told our mutual friends that I'm having a complete mental breakdown. She even posted a vague Instagram story about supporting your spouse through mental health challenges with a carefully curated photo of herself looking pensively out a window. But here's what I've learned. Every manipulative message, every attempt to paint me as unstable, every dismissive comment about my hospitalization only confirms that I made the right choice. The woman I married, the one I thought would stand by me through sickness and health, showed me exactly who she really was when I was at my most vulnerable. I have a consultation with a divorce attorney next week. Emma helped me organize all my medical documentation and saved screenshots of Catherine's messages where she admits to ignoring my symptoms and refusing to provide basic care during my medical emergency. I don't want a prolonged legal battle, I just want out cleanly and completely. This morning, I received a text from an unknown number. You'll be back. You always come crawling back when you need something. Who else would put up with your constant dramatics? I blocked the number and made myself breakfast. My hands don't shake when I hold a coffee cup anymore. It's fascinating how much can transform in just 1 year. Last Tuesday, I was at Target, reaching for coffee in the grocery aisle, when I heard a familiar laugh, that particular sound that used to make me tense up automatically, preparing excuses and bracing for criticism. This time, I simply grabbed my French roast and walked toward checkout. Catherine never even noticed me standing 2 aisles away. Many of you have been asking for updates, especially after my ex-wife's recent social media meltdown. Yes, I saw the Instagram posts about healing from toxic relationships. No, I haven't responded to any of her content. But I think it's time for a proper update, particularly because the entire situation has taken some unexpected turns. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. Catherine didn't contest anything. She was too busy maintaining her carefully crafted image as the long-suffering wife dealing with an unstable husband. The day we signed the final papers, she posted a lengthy Instagram caption about loving someone through their demons, alongside a black and white selfie of herself gazing pensively out a coffee shop window. I let her maintain that narrative. It was easier than fighting her version of events, and honestly, the people who needed to know the truth already did. My recovery took longer than anyone anticipated. The sepsis had left some lingering effects, chronic fatigue, occasional joint pain, and periodic brain fog that made concentration challenging. But here's the remarkable thing about not having someone constantly telling you that you're being dramatic. You actually start listening to your body's genuine needs. I began physical therapy, joined a support group for sepsis survivors, and slowly rebuilt both my strength and my confidence. That's where I met Naomi. She was leaving the community center as I was walking in for my first group meeting. She dropped her water bottle, and we both reached to pick it up at the same time, nearly colliding in the process. Turns out she was there for grief counseling. Her husband had died from an aggressive infection 3 years earlier, and she was still processing the trauma of watching someone you love fight for their life. We started getting coffee after our respective sessions, just talking about recovery, survival, and the strange things people say when you've faced mortality. I wasn't looking for romance, neither was she. Maybe that's exactly why it felt so natural to talk with her about everything: the frustration of invisible illness, the way people expect you to bounce back immediately, the guilt of surviving when others don't. We became genuine friends first, sharing articles about post-sepsis syndrome and recommending books about healing. She understood the exhaustion that comes not just from being sick, but from having to justify your illness to people who should support you unconditionally. Meanwhile, Catherine's perfect post-divorce life began showing some serious cracks. Her friends started reaching out to me individually, one by one. Apparently, my mental breakdown story didn't quite align with the medical records Emma had preserved, or the text messages Catherine had sent, or the hospital security footage that showed her scrolling through social media while I was in critical condition. Last month, she lost her entire closest friend group after they discovered she'd been lying extensively about her caregiving during my recovery. The final straw came when she told them she'd taken personal time off work to nurse me back to health, when in reality, she'd been on a spa weekend in Sedona with her new boyfriend while I was still struggling with basic daily tasks. The boyfriend didn't last long either. After he found Catherine's old messages to me, the ones calling me dramatic for having a fever of 104.7 degrees, he actually reached out to me directly, asking if everything in those texts was accurate. I sent him copies of my medical records and wished him luck navigating that particular storm. That's when the phone calls started in earnest. First from Catherine's mother, then her sister, then Catherine herself through various borrowed phones. I'd changed my number months earlier, so they all went through Emma. Their messaging had shifted dramatically from "he's completely unstable" to "he really needs to talk to Catherine because she's struggling emotionally." Emma's response was perfect. So was Robert when he was dying in the hospital. Catherine didn't seem concerned about his emotional well-being then. Last week, I got promoted at work. My new role is less physically demanding, but more creatively fulfilling, and my team surprised me with cupcakes to celebrate. Naomi took me to dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant afterward. It wasn't officially a date, or at least it didn't start as one, but sitting across from her, watching her laugh about her disastrous attempt at making homemade pasta the night before, something shifted between us. Yesterday, Catherine showed up at my office building. She'd lost weight, and her usually flawless makeup looked slightly smudged around the edges. Security stopped her in the lobby, but I could see her through the glass doors holding what appeared to be old photographs of us together. Classic Catherine, always ready with visual props for her emotional performances. I took the back exit and texted my therapist immediately. Her response was immediate. "It's perfectly healthy to feel nothing about this. Sometimes emotional neutrality is much healthier than feeling too much." She was absolutely right. A year ago, seeing Catherine might have shaken my resolve or made me question my decisions. Now I was more concerned about being late for coffee with Naomi. Today's support group meeting felt different somehow. Naomi and I exchanged a meaningful look when another survivor talked about their spouse not believing their ongoing symptoms. After the meeting ended, she touched my hand gently and said, "Want to get dinner instead of just coffee today?" I said yes immediately. Just as we were leaving the community center, my phone lit up with yet another message from an unknown number. "Catherine again. Somehow obtaining my new contact information. I know you're trying to punish me, but this has gone on long enough. I've changed completely. I'm a different person now. Just meet me for coffee, please." Naomi saw the message over my shoulder. She didn't pull away or get uncomfortable. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said something that struck me as profoundly wise. Sometimes people don't actually change. They just get better at performing change. I blocked that number and we went to dinner. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I talked about things that had absolutely nothing to do with illness, recovery, or betrayal. We discussed books we'd loved, places we wanted to travel, and our shared obsession with true crime documentaries. She snorted when she laughed too hard at one of my jokes, then looked mortified by the sound. I thought it was completely adorable. As I'm writing this update, I can see more messages appearing from Catherine's friends, family members, and new phone numbers I don't recognize. They're all saying essentially the same thing. She's sorry, she's changed, she needs closure, she deserves another chance. But I'm done with that chapter of my life completely. My phone just buzzed again, but this time it's Naomi sending me a link to a documentary she thinks I'll enjoy watching. I think I'm ready for the next chapter to begin in earnest. I wasn't planning on writing another update, but after what happened at yesterday's charity gala, I owe you the complete story of how everything finally ended. And yes, it truly ended, just not in the way Catherine expected. 3 years after I walked away from my marriage, I found myself standing in an elegant ballroom, watching my ex-wife's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The most satisfying part, I didn't have to orchestrate anything. I simply had to tell the truth. Let me back up slightly. Last month, Naomi and I got engaged. Nothing elaborate or Instagram-worthy, We were cooking dinner together at home. She was describing her latest documentary project about medical advocacy, and it just felt absolutely right. No professional photographer, no staged proposal, no social media announcement. Just us and our quiet happiness. We'd only told immediate family and close friends, but somehow Catherine discovered the news. The messages started flowing again. You can't be serious. She's obviously just a rebound relationship. We need to talk before you make a catastrophic mistake. I kept blocking numbers, but she kept finding new ways to reach out. Then came the charity gala. It's an annual fundraising event for sepsis awareness and survivor support that Naomi and I had helped organize through our support group. Catherine shouldn't have known about it, but clearly she'd done her research. She appeared looking like she'd stepped directly off a magazine cover, wearing the perfect, remorseful ex-wife costume, all calculated sad smiles and strategically glistening eyes. I was at the podium preparing to share my survival story when I spotted her in the audience. She was already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, ready to play the role of the devoted ex-wife who had stood by me heroically through my illness. That's when I decided enough was enough. I told my story, the complete, unedited truth, about waking up unable to move and begging for help, only to be told to handle it myself. About lying in a hospital bed with my organs failing while my wife scrolled through TikTok. About the security cameras that had captured her behavior. About the text messages. About her telling people I was having a mental breakdown when I finally found the strength to leave. The room fell completely silent. Catherine's tissue dabbing performance stopped abruptly. Her perfectly crafted image was disintegrating, and everyone was watching it happen. Then I played the audio recordings. Yes, I had them. Every dismissive comment, every cruel response when I'd asked for basic human compassion. Emma had suggested I document our interactions after I returned from the hospital, just in case legal evidence became necessary. She was absolutely right. Catherine tried to leave, but her new social circle, the ones she'd told elaborate stories about nursing me back to health, blocked her path. They wanted answers, and they wanted them immediately. I continued my presentation, sharing screenshots of her social media posts claiming she'd provided round-the-clock care, alongside hospital security footage timestamps showing she'd visited twice in 10 days. Her Instagram stories about supporting your spouse through illness displayed next to her actual text messages calling me dramatic for having a temperature of 104.7 degrees. But the most crucial part of survival, I said, looking directly at her, is recognizing what tried to kill you. Sometimes it's not just the infection. Sometimes it's the person who was supposed to love you, choosing to watch you suffer instead. Catherine stood up abruptly, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. You're completely twisting everything that happened. I was there. I helped you. That's when Naomi stepped forward. She'd spent weeks compiling interviews with hospital staff, timestamps of Catherine's social media activity during my critical care stays, and statements from mutual friends about Catherine's actual behavior during my recovery. All meticulously documented, all legally obtained, all absolutely devastating to Catherine's carefully constructed narrative. No, I said calmly. You weren't there. But everyone here now knows exactly where you were and what you were doing while I was fighting for my life. The whispers started immediately. Phones appeared. Catherine's reputation, the one she'd spent 3 years carefully crafting, crumbled in minutes. She tried one final desperate attempt. Robert, please. We can talk about this privately, like how you wanted to talk when I was dying, or when you were telling everyone I was mentally unstable, or when you tried to sabotage my relationship with Naomi. Her new boyfriend, the one she'd been featuring prominently on Instagram, stood up and walked out without a word. Her carefully cultivated friend group turned away. The charity board members who had welcomed her earlier now avoided all eye contact. I finished my presentation by announcing a new program for survivors whose partners abandoned them during critical illness. We're calling it the Handle It Yourself Foundation, a bit of dark humor that fellow survivors immediately understood and appreciated. Catherine ran out crying, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. Her meticulously curated social media accounts went dark within an hour. This morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages from other survivors sharing similar stories of abandonment and betrayal. Some are offering to testify about their own experiences. Others want to contribute to the foundation. Catherine's desperate attempts to silence me had achieved the exact opposite effect. She'd amplified every voice she tried to shut down. Naomi squeezed my hand as we read through the responses together. You know what's more powerful than revenge? She asked quietly. Truth, I replied. She's absolutely right. I didn't have to scheme or plot elaborate payback. I simply had to wait until Catherine had created enough lies that the truth itself became the most devastating weapon possible. The Handle It Yourself Foundation launches next month. We're already partnering with hospitals to provide support for patients whose partners abandon them during critical illness. Every informational pamphlet will include the warning signs I missed. Every support group will validate the experiences Catherine tried to dismiss and minimize. My near-death experience almost killed me. Catherine's abandonment almost destroyed my spirit completely. But in the end, they gave me something unexpected. A clear purpose, a partner who truly understands love and loyalty, and the perfect platform to ensure no one else endures this kind of betrayal alone. Catherine wanted a performance. She got one, just not the one she'd been expecting. I'm marrying Naomi this spring. No social media announcements necessary. The truth, it turns out, speaks quite eloquently for itself.